Hello guys, Dr. Cinema here. Let's see if I can think of a tie-in reason for this episode. Captain Marvel's coming out. Captain Marvel used to be the name of Shazam. Shazam is from DC Comics. DC Comics created the character Swamp Thing. So let's review the movie Swamp Thing. So like I said earlier, Swamp Thing, the 1982 film directed by Wes Craven, is an adaptation of the DC Comics character of the same name. While I am admittedly more of a new fan to the Swamp Thing character, I really love this guy. I mean, this is book 2 of Alan Moore's 6-book run on the character. So, even though Alan Moore didn't create the character, obviously, he was brought in to reboot the comic series as one of his first major jobs as a comic book writer. So this is really excellent. Of course, this 1982 film came out quite a few years before Alan Moore was brought in for the comic series, so we're gonna get a bit more of a campy version of the character. But anyway, what is the movie about specifically? Scientist Dr. Alec Holland is working on a top secret bioengineering project in a lab in Louisiana. The antagonist, Anton Arcane, sends his group of men to attack and steal the work of Dr. Alec Holland. During that attack, Alec Holland gets covered in chemicals from his own project, is set on fire, and falls into the swamp, where he turns into Swamp Thing, and later goes after Anton Arcane. Now, of course, in any comic book adaptation, there's going to be changes from screen to film. So one of the main characters from the comic is Matt Cable, a government agent that's assigned to protect Dr. Alec Holland and his wife, Dr. Linda Holland. Now in the movie, Dr. Linda Holland, instead of being Alec's wife, is his sister, and Matt Cable is switched to a woman named Alice Cable, and she replaces a comic book character known as Abigail Arcane, and becomes also the love interest. So we got 2 in 1 for a character. A gender swap version of a previous character, and replacing a comic book love interest as the live action love interest. So, that actually sort of makes sense, kind of streamlines and simplifies the story and a couple characters in the movie as opposed to the comic, which can get complicated pretty fast. And the Swamp Thing character usually has a lot to do with the supernatural and the mystical and that kind of stuff. In this movie, it's just straight out science, more or less. And that's rewind. So Swamp Thing usually has supernatural or mystical connections to his origin and his powers in the comics. In the movie, it's explained through science, this project he's working on, and his villain, Anton Arcane, is usually a sorcerer. But in this film, he's just a wealthy man who hires a bunch of military people to steal Alec Holland's work so that he can find a way to gain immortality. So a lot of Swamp Thing's powers in the movie is explained through science rather than magic, which makes sense. So basically, the changes that happen from page to screen is a way to sort of simplify and streamline the story and characters for a more mainstream audience, which actually works pretty well for this adaptation of the character. And honestly, I really like this film. Now, Swamp Thing, this film, is one of the very few movies directed by Wes Craven that's not a horror film. So this film came out in 1982 and would be followed up later by Wes Craven's next film, Nightmare on Elm Street. So actually, in the book Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy, it does actually talk a little bit about the Swamp Thing movie. And it talks to some of the things that he changed from comic to screen, such as changing Matt Cable to Alice Cable, saying that he could have a more romantic element. I was intrigued by making it into a Beauty and the Beast tale. And that's one of the things that's kind of unique about this film. It's sort of like a Wes Craven portfolio for Hollywood to show that he's not just a horror filmmaker. He wanted to use this film as a way to do action, stunt work, and romance, which for the most part does work out fairly well. And the suits used for Swamp Thing, considering the time period, and considering that how much the budget was slashed during production by the studio, it still looks pretty good. Couple scenes that are focused on the eyes that are a little bit weird, but overall I thought that looked good, still pretty good. Although the actors that worked on the movie said that a lot of the changes happened by the studio during production were pretty challenging and difficult to make. Although they all really loved working with Wes Craven during their production, which is actually really good to know. And Wes Craven, while he did use this film as a way to sort of prove that he's more than just a horror filmmaker, he did say that that he wanted to that he felt he had a responsibility to do the best he could, because by the time I had absorbed it all and realized what a following it had and how important it was to people, I wanted to capture the spirit of the comic. So, while he was using this as a way, sort of like showing that he can do other stuff, he realized he does have a responsibility to create a version of the character that fans would find acceptable. Upon its initial release at the box office, it didn't do very well. Let's see if I can find a quote here. Hold on. Yeah, right here it says Craven's hard work would not be rewarded at the box office upon the film's release, although the movie has since become a cult favorite among many, with Roger Ebert even saying that it's one of those movies that falls in between buried treasures and guilty pleasures. And it was one of those movies that didn't actually make back money after, as quickly as it was released. So due to its underperformance at the box office, Craven said that he had a difficult time finding another job. It was the first of my films that really didn't make its money back right away. So in a way, that's kind of sad because this movie, Swamp Thing, is actually still pretty good. I actually really enjoyed watching this. I understood why certain changes were made, and I appreciate it for what it is. A little campy, yes, but also a certain style and atmosphere that is quite good. And while certain Wes Craven themes in his usual films like family and society aren't in this film, and it's more focused on entertainment, the theme of having a close connection between the characters and its surrounding in the film, the environment, is still something that shows up in this film, partly because it's still Wes Craven directing it, but also because that's just how the character Swamp Thing is like in the comics. So this is a bit of a there's a silver lining in this dark situation, because while Swamp Thing didn't really make back its money right away and it underperformed when it was initially released, Wes Craven may have a difficult time finding work, but with the help of New Line Cinema, he was able to then make his next film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, which later cemented him as a sort of horror filmmaker legend. So there's the good and the bad. So long story short, while the comic version of Swamp Thing and the 1982 Wes Craven film may be two noticeably different things, the core elements are all still there, and it's still really enjoying to watch. And honestly, Wes Craven's pretty much a great pick of director for this movie, because he found a way to make it a film that fans would love, but also something that he could use to show that he's more than just a horror filmmaker, even though that may ultimately not have really proved to be all that successful in the end, in the way that he wanted it to be. But this is still a really enjoyable film. Please go watch it. That's really all I have to say. So, like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see you guys next time then.